Hello, friends and family. Welcome to Sasquatch Sisters Northwest YouTube channel. My name is Angelique, and I will be your host around the campfire. So grab yourself a good roasting stick, a nice cup of hot chocolate or cider, and a comfortable spot around the fire. Winter is definitely coming on soon, and the air is getting cold. So bundle up and let's begin. Tonight is the last episode in our three-part series on the Spirit Lake area of North Idaho. Now, don't let that disappoint you, because I promise you I have more true encounters coming from that area that I'll be sharing with you at a later date, and there are many coming, so make sure you stay tuned for those. As you recall, in our last episode, we revisited Tony and his daughter Autumn, and then we went on to visit with Melissa, and we saw the photos of the footprints that she found leading into and out of the water at the lake in an area that no one swims in. Then finally, we ended by going with Tony's daughter Autumn and her best friend off into the woods to hunt for moss, where the two women immediately had sticks thrown at them. For tonight's episode, I'm going to take you with me, and we're going to go back up into that same spot with Trinity and her husband Mitchell to do some investigating. And then finally, we're going to end it by going back one more time to that area when I took Tanya Marie, who's one of our research team members, and we went back up in there, and I'm going to share with you what happened to us. It was very interesting, but first I want to share with you what happened to Trinity and Mitchell and I. Now, as I said before, Trinity is my daughter-in-law, so her husband Mitchell is my son, and he is actually a very experienced tracker, and due to his military training, he's also someone I take with me when I'm in an area where there could possibly be danger. He is also quite passionate about learning and communicating with the forest people, and has had many of his own encounters as well. So I trust his intuition and the evidence that he finds. What I'm about to share with you is my own experience in that area and the results of our investigation. Now, much of this information may seem useless and kind of irrelevant, but I'm going to break it down for you, and I really hope that you take it into consideration. I think then you'll find it interesting and hopefully useful. So let me explain a little bit about the area. The place that we went into is along a dirt road past Spirit Lake, and it's not in an area where there's people or cabins, because you need to purchase a permit to enter that area. It belongs to the Inland Paper Company. So needless to say, it kind of came as a surprise for us when we went back in there and immediately found evidence that I think is phenomenal. And when we got back into that spot where we could park, we took with us large garbage bags, and we slowly made our way up the drainage. Now, this is something my family and I have done ever since my sons were little. When we enter the woods, we try to clean up any garbage we may find. Our family's motto has always been to leave the forest cleaner than it was when we got there. So whenever I hear of a place that has garbage, I always make it a point to go back and clean it up. Well, since Trinity and Autumn had felt that they had been chased out of that area because the forest people thought they were leaving garbage, we all agreed as a family that what we needed to do was to go back up in there and clean it up, not only as a gesture of kindness, but also to let them know that we were sorry for the disrespect others had shown to their home, and that we were there in a good way. Although this place is not too far from the lake, it is in an area that's secluded and nowhere near any of the cabins or the hiking trails where you might find human activity. really you'll only find maybe a few ATVs and some pickups, and every once in a while some people that have purchased an inland paper passage who want to go up on the mountain. But there isn't a lot of traffic, and definitely not anywhere near anyone's garbage. Well, once we got in under the canopy of trees, we could tell that the spring runoff had ended and dried months before we got there, and everything that had been muddy at one time had basically turned into cement. So there were some moose tracks and some old coyote scat along an area where the water had once come off the mountain, filtered down into a culvert under the road, and then it traveled farther on down the hillside where it eventually made its way, I imagine, into either a swamp area or the lake. It was steep, and it was shady, and we were immediately surrounded by garbage. At first, we assumed that people were tossing their garbage out while they were out on their four-wheelers or something and making their way up the mountain, which immediately irritates me because we have a free landfill available for the residents of Kootenai County. So there really isn't any excuse to toss your garbage out into the woods, except, well, to be quite frank with you, pure laziness. But as we stopped and really examined what was there, we began to realize that it wasn't at all what it appeared to be in the beginning. As we got out and started picking up the garbage, we started paying attention to what we were picking up. The sacks that were there actually had some fresh food in some of them. There was a bag of onions that looked like they were untouched and still edible, and they were far enough up the drainage that no one could have tossed them out of their vehicle and had them land that far up the hillside. Many of the sacks that were there were far too heavy for any scavenger to haul up there, like a raccoon or a coyote. They had quite obviously been carried there. In another sack, there was a half chewed up empty egg carton and a very large clump of dried vomit next to it on the ground that looked like whatever tried to eat the carton immediately regurgitated it. Above that, on the hillside, was the pile of eggshells that were all set together in a way that was obvious they had not just fallen out of the egg carton, but looked rather like they had been carefully cracked open and the eggs had been sucked out right there on the hillside and the shells deposited next to each other neatly on the ground. Now, if you've ever watched a dog or any kind of an animal that eats raw eggs, the majority of the time they'll crush the eggshells to get to the inside, and then they'll either lap it up or they'll just eat the shells right along with it. And then you'll find bits and pieces of eggshell all over the place. This didn't have that. These shells were literally almost in half and carefully set next to each other. It was very interesting. Now, when we followed the drainage up the hillside, we found a once opened and resealed plastic Ziploc bag of raw boneless chicken breasts. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but it actually is, because the fact that it had been opened at one time and was missing several pieces of chicken, there would have been residue at the opening that would have attracted a scavenger. There were no holes or bite marks in the bag, and nothing to suggest that it had been carried up in the mouth of a canine or a bear or any other wild animal that would be interested in rotting meat. Well, that drew my attention the most because even though the chicken didn't look like it had been there for maybe more than a week, it was beginning to rot, and it would have been candy to a canine or a bear. But the bag was in perfect condition, and it showed no signs of having been carried up there because the food was bad. It showed no signs of rips or tears or puncture marks. And in fact, most of the garbage that was there looked like the contents had been fresh when they were brought up the drainage. It was very puzzling. It was almost like someone had robbed the sack of food out of the back seat of someone's car while they were offloading their groceries and taking them into a house. And then they quickly snuck them up the hillside to eat and stash at a later date. It was very different than when you see places where people just huck their garbage out of a moving vehicle. These had all quite obviously been brought there, carried up the hillside away from the road, and none of them appeared to have been carried by any animal with sharp teeth. Well, could this all have happened from a homeless person? Well, I kind of doubt it. Not too many homeless people will try their hand at eating the carton in which the eggs came in. Egg cartons are highly flammable, and most homeless people are going to use the cartons for fire starter. I think even if I was homeless, I would have used the egg carton to start a fire in which I cooked and ate the chicken and onions and eggs. There really wasn't anything suggesting that there was a person living there. And the reason why I say that is because there were no food caches, there was no sign of there being human activity. It was more of an area in which it seemed something had stolen the food, ran it up the hillside, and was just literally eating it and throwing it out as they were making their way up the hillside, and eating and throwing it out while it was raw. And that was what gave me the impression that this wasn't a place for a homeless person. This was something different. Now, as we were walking around and picking up the garbage and stuffing it into our own garbage sacks and removing every little bit and piece of anything that showed that there ever was any humans' garbage or anything like that, we started hearing twigs snapping on the hillside above us. And then the squirrels began to chatter. Now, one of the things that was taught to me when I was actually very young by my dad is that you need to always pay close attention and listen for when the squirrels are chirping, because what they'll do is they'll come out on the limbs of the trees and they'll get angry and they'll scold any predators in the area as they pass by. So if you hear one far enough away that you know that you're not standing anywhere near it, then it's a very strong possibility that you are not alone in the woods, and you need to immediately be aware of your surroundings and keep an eye in that direction. Watch for movement in the trees, because you can get a general idea of where the predators are at from where the squirrels are raising a commotion. If you hear more than one and in a different direction, then you could quite possibly be in a bad situation. Well, it was while we were hearing these squirrels chatter that my daughter-in-law began to smell a very foul odor, and it began to settle in on us while we were cleaning up. Well, at first we assumed it was the smell of the garbage, but then my son kind of drew it to my attention that the smell wasn't coming from the garbage. Most of the garbage didn't even have a smell, and what should have smelled bad, like the rotting chicken, was sealed up. But this odor was drifting down from above us on the hillside, and the only way to really describe it was that it was like walking into a very, very dirty locker room with a backed up sewer. Well, at that point in time, my son and I, we sent Trinity back down to the Jeep, and he and I hiked up further up the hill to look to see if we could find whatever it was that was causing the smell. While we were looking, trying to eliminate every possibility of it being a carcass, of it being more garbage or something that we just hadn't found. But what we did find was that it moved around and it dissipated, and then it would show up again, and it seemed to be kind of coming from the areas where the squirrels were scolding us, or scolding it, I should say. So we had a pretty good idea at that point in time that we were being circled while we were there. And probably about 40 yards up the hill, so it wasn't super close to us, but it was close enough for sure to put us on heightened alert. It was at that point in time that we decided to go ahead and make our way back down the hillside. And as we did, we would stop every few feet and just say quietly in the direction of where the squirrels were chattering, "We're just here to clean up garbage, and then we're going to leave. We aren't here to cause you any problems or to hurt you." Well, we went ahead and we sent Trini down to the Jeep, and she was staying down there while my son and I continued to clean up the rest of the trash. And as we did so, we happened to have looked down and found an enormous footprint. Trini was getting hit with what we think may have been infrasound because she was dizzy and nauseated enough that we had to leave and take her home. My son and I weren't experiencing anything like that, but we also kept talking to the direction where the squirrels were chattering as we made our way along the drainage. After that, we went ahead and we loaded up the garbage and we took Trinity home, and then we decided we would go ahead and come back and get a better look at the prints the next weekend, which we did. And when he and I went back out again, we immediately felt a presence nearby. And so we stopped what we were doing and we asked permission for us to be there. Now, I know that that may sound just kind of out there for me to be able to say that, but there is a definite understanding that these beings have of your intention. And when you speak to them calmly and tell them your intention, we have found that they seem to relax more around you and allow you more time to be near them and to look at them and do whatever it is that you need to do. That is very important. After going up and looking at the footprint, it was a very good one, and so my son had decided that he wanted to go ahead and pull it. Now, we don't normally take casts, but this actually was for my son a gift to him and his wife, because for her it was the evidence of her very first encounter, and so the two of them were very excited about it. Well, we asked permission out loud to pull it, and he vowed that he was only going to have the print in his possession. And then we waited for a few minutes, and then the pressure of feeling that presence nearby kind of subsided and was replaced by a peaceful, more calm feeling. So we had their permission. Now my son and daughter now have that print for themselves. And after he was done pulling the cast, we left a tobacco and a food offering. That is a native tradition, and it's something that we follow very carefully, because in our area, anytime that you take from something, you always give back. And so because we were taking the track, we gave back to the being. And then as soon as my son pulled the track, he was careful and destroyed the tracks immediately afterwards. And he said out loud to them while he was doing it, "Don't worry, we're not going to tell anyone where we found these or give out your location." And he told them that he wouldn't be back. So after my son and I loaded up what was left of anything that could possibly be showing any signs that we had been there, I went ahead and I turned back to the woods as I was getting ready to leave, and I told the forest people that I would be back with their permission, but that I would come in a good way. So the next week, I brought Tanya Marie, who's one of the other researchers on our team, with me, and the two of us went back up to investigate that area even further. Now, when we arrived, we immediately felt the pressure that you get when you know that you're being watched. So the first thing we did was to speak out loud our purpose, and we introduced ourselves and stated that we had no intention of harming them, that we were just there to look around and to hopefully get to know them. We didn't find any new tracks, but we did find a rather odd new article of garbage, and this may be pertinent, it might not, but it was a half-used jar of Vaseline with human-like bite marks in it. And they were very small bite marks, so I don't know what that could have been. Take it or leave it as you will, but it was placed strategically up on the hillside, and so we deliberately left that there just because what we felt was that it was not something that was being utilized for food, but it was rather something that was taken because the being liked it, and we didn't want to remove from them anything that they liked, so we left it there. Now, the whole time this is going on, we are hearing the squirrels chattering, and we knew that there was something above us on the hillside, the same as what had happened to my son and I. And we also began hearing tree knocks. Now, Tanya is very intuitive, and she is an empath, and she could feel the presence of something watching us almost immediately. So she asked me to make a bird call. Now, I have spent my life trying to imitate birds, and it's just my own personal achievement when I can get one of them to answer me. So one of my favorite calls is a chickadee mating call. Now that's a sound that you're only going to hear in the early spring, and once summer hits, you won't hear that call anymore. The chickadees change their song to a different song for the rest of the year. But I will deliberately use that call in the fall and the winter just to see if something responds, because if it does, then I know it's not natural. So I gave my best impression of a chickadee, and I don't even think 1 second went by before we immediately got a deeper off-key response that made the hair on our arms just stand straight up. I tried it a few more times, but as usual, they only give us a one-time response. But it was exciting anyway, and yes, we did look to see if it was a crow possibly mimicking us or any other kind of a bird, and no, it wasn't. Now, I want to tell you this, I do not recommend ever whistling after dark in the woods, and that's something that the elders will tell you is dangerous. But this was in broad daylight, and even then, we still got a response that wasn't a bird. Was it a Sasquatch? Well, unless you see it, you can't say for sure. So out of honesty, I have to admit that we don't know. But what we did know was that in that one tiny little area alongside the dirt road, there was enough evidence to prove to us that it could have quite possibly been just that. Will we go back there again? No. On our way out the last time, we left one last gift and we told them we wouldn't come back. And that's one thing our research team has discovered the hard way, is that if you give them your word, you better stick by it. Any promises made must be kept. Otherwise, you risk losing their respect and their trust. You ask permission, you state your intentions when you arrive, and you state when you are leaving, and if you will return. Never say one thing and do another. That makes you a liar, and they will not respect you from then on. In a worst case scenario, you will anger them and quite possibly put yourself in danger. And in a least case scenario, they will no longer communicate with you. Well, considering that they were communicating with us and communicating with each other through wood knocks and whistles, and they allowed my son and I to pull the cast of the print without trying to chase us out, and we didn't get anything thrown at us, I don't want to ever lose that respect, and I don't want to ever lie to them. Well, you really shouldn't be dishonest with anyone. But when it comes to these people, I want you to know that not only are they extremely intelligent and intuitive, but they also recognize dishonesty in us, and it angers them. So if you happen to be communicating with them, do so in honesty. I don't normally do this, but tonight I'm going to end this with a short video of my son measuring the footprint that he found and a photo of the cast. Now it looks a little funny because we accidentally broke off the big toe, but as you can see, it was a good one and I hope you enjoy it. So if you have had a true encounter with the forest people and you live east of the Cascades, over across the panhandle of North Idaho and into the west side of Montana, and would like to share your encounter with us, we would be honored if you would do so. You can reach me at Sasquatch Sisters Northwest at gmail.com, and you can also contact us through our Facebook page, Sasquatch Sisters Northwest. So, be safe, be honest, and throw another log on the fire.
So, starting from heel to toe is 16 inches, and then going across.
What I am seeing here is some disturbed moss. So whether it was a deer or something else.
7 inches across.
Down the rock.
And you can see the indentation underneath the stick was rocked, so it was stepped here first, and then the center archway of the foot causing the stick to drop back down full force to stick up like that. Oh, Chipmunk says we're here. No, we're not. Wow.